All right, great to see you all. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Bridget Flynn. I'm a Senior Manager of Climate Programs with Second Nature, and we're excited to be hosting this webinar with Clearloop. Just really quickly, I will give a few little housekeeping items, and then we'll turn it over to all of our panelists. So Tucker, yeah, thank you. Perfect. Just wanted to mention that this program is being recorded, and we'll post it to our YouTube channel after the webinar, after we're able to process it, and send you an email with a link. So if you miss anything or want to see a graph again, you'll have an opportunity to do that. The slides will be shared with the recording. And you can also feel free, of course, to reach out to the panelists directly, and we'll share their information as well. You can also share the program with your colleagues who might have missed it as well. So just wanted to mention that. Next, I wanted to mention that we will be using the Q&A function. So at the bottom of your screen, you should see a little kind of like a comment square that has a question on it. That's the Q&A panel, and that's where we'll be using that panel to moderate our questions. So feel free during the presentation to type your question in at any time. And then after the panelists go through their comments, we'll be using that Q&A function to address your questions. As other folks are writing questions in, you should also have the opportunity to upvote questions so that we can ask the ones that the most number of people are sharing first. So please feel free to use that function. The chat is also open, so feel free to discuss with each other if you see other people here that you know or things that you want to share in the chat. You're welcome to do so there as well. Otherwise, everyone will be on mute during the session, and we can always unmute you if you want to ask your question out loud later on. I see the number is still ticking up, so for those of us folks that just joined us, thank you so much. And I think now I will go ahead and turn it over to Meredith Lee, a Senior Manager of Climate Programs with Second Nature, who reviewed the Clearloop methodology and will be sharing a few comments about our partnership with Clearloop and their solution. And then we'll get it over to our friends from Clearloop to share a little bit more about their solution and some of the current events in renewable energy. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Meredith.
Thanks, Bridget. Wow, current events in renewable energy could go on all day, but I'm excited to just be able to say a few words before we hear from Clearloop directly. Second Nature is excited to include Clearloop in our network of trusted partners, and that means that we vetted them pretty thoroughly. And so I want to kind of just speak to three big ways that we see Clearloop delivering value for our members. So first, we were initially attracted to Clearloop's solution because it provides accessibility. And I think for a diversity of higher ed campuses to participate in meaningful grid decarbonizations with their climate action investments, sometimes large-scale PPAs and VPPAs have not been attainable. And we feel like Clearloop's solution is promising in that regard. So excited for you to hear more from them about that. Secondly, as we started to learn more, we were really inspired and continue to be inspired by the equity-centered approach that Clearloop takes. So just want to emphasize that the care that Clearloop uses to choose projects with an eye for energy justice and to partner with communities impacted most by its projects to ensure equitable outcomes is in line with Second Nature's commitment to climate justice. And then thirdly, and certainly not least, the integrity of claims that our campuses can make related to their partnership with our partners is really important to us. And so as Bridget mentioned, we vetted the Clearloop methodology thoroughly. And we find that it combines both the best available methods for calculating the emissions impact of its projects with the appropriate level of transparency and innovation that is needed to manage the unavoidable risks in electricity-related carbon accounting. And so you can read more about our process to vet Clearloop's methodology on our blog. I will put a link in the chat shortly. But for now, I can just turn it over to the Clearloop team to tell you more in depth about their solution. So thanks for being here, guys.
Thank you so much, Meredith and the Second Nature team. We are so thrilled to be here. My name is Laura Zapata. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Clearloop. So it's really wonderful to be able to share the solution that we've come up with over the past 7 years with you all. We have a really great program here planned, and hopefully we'll be able to answer many of your questions, and hopefully we've piqued your interest enough. But there is sort of what we've done and what our solution is, and then the context that we're living in, which is an appropriate place for us to be able to bring up and talk about what that means for us and what that means for the solutions that are out there. So we'll get into the agenda here with the Clearloop 101, which I will soon turn over to my esteemed colleague and wonderful go-to person for all things universities and higher ed, Tucker. Tucker, you may have heard from him in the past. He tends to send many emails to a lot of higher ed folks and has had many conversations with universities across the country and many other businesses across the country, but want to make sure that you hear from him directly. And then we'll turn it over to Eric, also an esteemed colleague who joined us as a senior advisor earlier this year, but who previously was one of our main customers at Vanderbilt University here in Nashville as vice chancellor there. So it's really great to be able to have somebody who believed in the solution and was a customer who's now joined our team and is helping make sure that we make the connection with higher ed and others, but really speaking to the context and where we are, and then a bit more about what we can do. But I just want to express my gratitude. Clearloop is a fairly new startup, 7 years in startup world, maybe old, but it's fairly new for infrastructure. And we're really proud of the focus that we've been able to have on distressed communities that are looking for economic investment, and really this twin engine of using climate action as a way to invest in communities and expand access to clean energy, and not just a decarbonization tool. Really proud to be able to do that with many different organizations in higher ed institutions as well. So I'm hopeful that you will learn a lot and that you will teach us some as we get down into this conversation. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Tucker. Tucker, you're on mute.
You'd think I would have learned that lesson by now at this point with all the Zoom calls. Thanks, Laura. I also want to express gratitude for everyone joining today. We've always admired higher ed for its leadership in sustainability, and we've really enjoyed just getting to know Second Nature as a network a bit more. I think we connected with Meredith and Bridget last year after Aishi, and really got a lot of value of going to the conference earlier this year. So it's a privilege to just connect with you all here today. Before we launch fully into the 101 on what we do, I wanted to give a bit of background on Clearloop as a Silicon Ranch company. We operate as the carbon solutions platform for Silicon Ranch Corporation, who is one of the largest independent solar power providers in the US. Silicon Ranch was founded right here in Nashville with the goal of using the emerging technology of solar infrastructure to be a tool for economic development and growth in the Southeast. And what's really made Silicon Ranch successful, and what continues to separate Silicon Ranch and Clearloop has been really a continued commitment to a fully integrated platform model. Which really just means that we, develop, design, fund, construct, own, and operate all of our projects for the entire lifetime. And that approach lets us first build the way that we want to build, and that improves project outcomes, but it also improves the relationship and trust that we have with the communities where we sit these projects. And it means that we can focus on the things we want to focus on, like bolstering local economies by sourcing domestic, implementing land management and regenerative energy practices, and emphasis on community engagement, finding new ways that we can innovate on our project sites so that we can unlock new megawatts. This photo here to the right was actually taken earlier this week on one of our farms south of Nashville, where we're studying ways that we can integrate cattle and into our agrivoltaic grazing practices. Cattle being a much larger livestock industry than sheep, which we also do have a lot of. But these are just some of the many ways that Silicon Ranch and Clearloop are looking for ways that we can create harmony between what we do and the communities where we want to sit. So, why is that important right now? It's pretty simple. The U.S. power demand is rising faster than at any point in modern history, and fossil fuels still make up more than 60% of our total electricity production. The shortest way to put this is that cleaner power unlocks a cleaner economy. And our footprint is driven heavily by the production of electricity in the U.S. And as you can see on this graph outlining that demand growth, the last decade, that growth has been a little under 1%, and conservative metrics have that even doubling moving forward. We will have to build record levels of new generation just to match where consumption is headed. And that's clean infrastructure or not. And so really focusing in on adding clean electrons to the grid is the most scalable pathway we have right now to broader decarbonization. But where Clearloop really separates itself as a carbon solutions provider is that we're looking to accelerate equitable grid decarbonization. We want to go and build solar projects in the parts of the US that are still some of the most carbon intense and fossil fuel reliant, because where we build really matters as well. We do this by looking at three primary factors. So the first is solar irradiance. How much sunlight can we turn into electricity? It's probably not hard to track why that would be important for a solar company. The second is a concept called emissionality. Where will new solar generation actually displace the most carbon? As you can imagine, building in a carbon intense and fossil fuel heavy grid has a much larger carbon impact than adding that same project somewhere in a region that's already clean. Not to say that we don't need clean generation elsewhere, but in regions like Louisiana, where the production of electricity, only 0.3% comes from wind and solar, that has a massive impact on what we can do in the environment. And then the third factor here is community co-benefits. And this is really where the work starts to ripple out beyond just clean energy production. Many of the communities that stand to benefit the most from clean energy investment from an environmental standpoint are also the ones that have been historically underinvested in. Places and communities that have lost jobs, population has been in decline, opportunity has maybe been stagnant over the last few decades. And so these are the factors that are also important to us and recognizing that overlap. And so when we build a new solar project in these areas, it's not really just about adding electrons to the grid. It's also showing how solar can contribute to real, economic renewal, which brings us to our primary goal is how can we make solar do more for communities? How can we create lasting community impact? We know, for example, that every project will bring real economic development and investment from increased property tax revenue that's going to support public services, to job creation, both during the construction and operations of those projects. It's also a really powerful signal when you build a new infrastructure project in a community that has not received investment in a long time. That is a powerful signal that can go out to others that might be looking to invest. But Clearloop really wants to go a step further as well. We've created our own energized programming, starting with STEM education, which provides hands-on training for middle school and high school teachers, and provides resources for those classrooms. We also provided energy-focused curriculum for community and technical college instructors for that next generation, that next workforce that's interested in solar as a potential career field. And then energized connections. enabling high impact community led projects, whether that's through micro grants, scholarships, or other forms of investment, ways that we can connect both the place of where we are building with the partners that are supporting these projects. And all of these programs are delivered at no cost to the communities, because for us, prioritizing impact beyond the project is really integral to what we define as the social license to operate. The photo actually to the top right was taken in Panola County at one of our Flip the Switch events. And they elected to add solar panels to their county seal, which is a really beautiful gesture, but also just a powerful signal at how the script can really flip, and how these projects can really be fully embraced by the people that we want to partner with. And I think ultimately what resonates with our partners is that the impact here isn't abstract or really hard to explain. It's happening in very real places, in communities that have been left behind, where we know we can maximize both carbon impact and social benefits. To date, we've been very successful at aligning both companies that want to get involved with communities that are embracing these sorts of changes. So since 2019, we have partnered with more than 75 companies and institutions. That has resulted in 11 active solar projects across Tennessee, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Arkansas. All of these communities experience higher than average national marginal emissions, and have really suffered from being left out of that clean energy transition. We also have over 80 megawatts in additional projects already under contract through 2027, which means our ability to grow and create impact is just continuing to grow. And beyond the projects themselves, our work also continues to extend to local schools and communities. As you can see, 53 teachers across our project communities have received hands-on training and classroom resources to help incorporate solar into the classroom, so that the project that sits in their backyard or sits in their community can be a point of pride and of interest. So there's been a lot of success so far to date, and we're excited about the road ahead. But we can't go through a 101 webinar right now without also talking about the impacts that's happening on the broader scale. The recent passing of the budget bill hit renewable energy very hard, as it did, I know, for higher ed as well. And so I want to turn it over to Eric now to talk a little bit about what happened with renewable energy tax credits. And he is someone that can speak to this both as our senior advisor, but also as someone who has sat on the all side as well. Eric, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Tucker. And before I get into this slide, I just also want to express my gratitude to the Second Nature team and all of you who are in attendance today. It's a real pleasure to be here. And after more than 35 years in higher education, it's been like a positive jolt of energy for me to be on this side of the fence, working with wonderful colleagues like Tucker and Laura. So welcome. Tucker touched on this already, but the Inflation Reduction Act, which everybody recalls, was passed back in August of 2022. And that really did supercharge renewable energy development and deployment. And what we've pictured here is a typical, what I call capital stack for a solar development project, or said differently, these are the sources of funds a developer deploys to fund the cost of building a project. And you can see from this visual that IRA incentives cover up to 50% of project costs, or half of that capital stack. And note that Clearloop projects take advantage of all of these credits because A, we only use domestic content, and we build in what are called qualified energy communities. But under the OBBBA, which Tucker also referenced, I want you to know that that window is closing fast. And developers like us have to start projects by July of 2026 to retain the full value of these tax credits. And this is also happening at a time when demand for new electricity capacity is rising at historic rates, as Tucker also touched on. So the impact of that phase down in the tax credits, it's significant. And it's really pretty straightforward. Once those credits phase down, solar projects become harder to finance and prices go up, and fewer projects will happen because fewer projects will pencil out. I also know from my experience in higher education that various funding sources in your industry are also under pressure, tuition income in a variety of ways, endowments, which I know in some cases are being taxed, federal grants, et cetera. But that impact, I also know, varies a little bit by institution, whereas the solar industry is going to be rather uniformly impacted by the phase out of these tax credits. And that's a fact that also begins to emphasize why timing matters so much. So let's go to the next slide to focus on timelines a little further. So again, timing is everything right now. That Inflation Reduction Act, again, it opened a historic window for clean energy investment, and it really incentivized clean energy development to align with historical increases in demand, and that window starts closing in mid-2026. So, quote unquote, safe harboring projects is the only way in the solar industry to preserve those full benefits for a period of time. And let's note, solar projects, they have significant lead time. There's equipment purchasing, there's contracting that has to take place. So we have a deadline with our existing and potential clients to execute letters of intent by the end of Q1 2026, which I know is right around the corner. And then what happens is with LOIs in hand, we go and we procure equipment to retain access to those 50% tax credits I talked about. And then projects actually have to begin construction or officially safe harbor by July 2026, as outlined here. So let me be clear, that doesn't mean that July 2026 is when all these projects flip the switch. That's the deadline for qualifying a project as safe harbored. And those projects then will be completed and delivered over the course of the next 5 years, as mentioned here, 2026 through 2030. And again, projects that miss this safe harbor window are not going to receive incentives. They're going to have much tighter financing, and they're really going to shrink, the economic advantage that's made solar an attractive option. And so really think of this as a strategy to lock in today's economics for tomorrow's projects over the next 5 years. And I will say, before I turn it over back to Tucker, that Clearloop and Silicon Ranch, we're acutely aware of this, and we are truly sprinting so that we can create safe harbored capacity. And this really is the moment to move from what I would call interest to action if you want to be part of that. And with that, I think I'm going to turn it back to you, Tucker, and I think you're going to talk about how a Clearloop transaction actually works.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Eric. So our transaction model aims to keep things very simple for our customers. Our customers make a one-time upfront payment for solar capacity that is matched directly with their, unique sustainability and impact goal. In return, they receive the lifetime amount of environmental attributes that's generated by that capacity at the time of contract signing. And that's theirs to acknowledge upfront as carbon offsets or over time as RECs. But this way, every investment is matched to new infrastructure, providing the additionality and impact that you might typically think of being associated with a PPPA or VPPA, but without that long-term year-over-year commitment or market risk. And maybe you're looking at this and saying, hey, this is cool, this is all well and good, but our footprint isn't big enough to yield an entire solar project. That's also okay, because all our investments are matched to capacity. We have the ability to support multiple customers through one solar project under a crowd-funded model. So, if you're looking to offset 10 to 15,000 metric tons a year for air travel, or interested in solar capacity that would generate 10 to 15,000 high impact RECs a year to supplement some scope 2 goals, we can support those types of transactions as well. We can serve all different types of demand through this model. And our pricing is very straightforward. But this also means that because your investment being tied to capacity, your investment, big or small, is directly supporting those measurable carbon emissions reductions. Our costs are based directly on the cost of construction. And so depending on your ability to also lock in projects right now and establish LOIs in the shorter term, we would lock in these rates and honor this pricing through 2030. And so that really brings us home here to the final stretch. What can we offer right now? I think in a normal environment, we'd be putting a project in front of you and talking about a unique community and offering that year over year. But really, it comes down to this. If you want to participate in these types of high impact renewable energy projects, come talk to us. I would love to connect with you. As Eric said, we're moving very quickly to match inventory with customers, and we'd love to connect with your teams, learn more about your goals, and provide proposals based on what we have in our pipeline and what you actually need. The way that works is you just need to tell us your demand, whether you're looking for RECs or if you're looking for carbon offsets. Bring that to us, and then we can provide a proposal based on your impact goals. And then we would aim to execute an LOI by no later than Q1 of 2026, which I know is a short runway, but is extremely necessary, as that allows us to really begin the safe harbor process. And then finally, we would aim to execute a framework partnership agreement, guaranteeing which is what guarantees the delivery of that capacity in those environmental attributes, as Eric alluded to. So, I think if we can leave one message for now, and we're extremely excited to be a supporting partner in this network, we just want to know how we can support your goals. We have projects that we are going to be building, and we'd love to include you in these projects if this is the type of work that you want to support. And, I'd love to answer any questions as well. And maybe, Bridget, we can turn it back over to you. But here's my contact information. I have emailed many folks probably in this webinar and called many folks as well. You can always reach out to me on email or give me a call. We'd love to chat and just talk about how we can uniquely support you all right now. But that pretty much does it for our presentation. We chose to keep it pretty prompt, but maybe we can jump into a few questions and I can turn it over to Bridget to moderate.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So a few people submitted questions in the registration form, and then I have one submitted through the chat. But just a reminder, in case folks didn't join us at the beginning, please use the Q&A function on the bottom panel to add your questions, and we'll kind of go from there. So I have a few of them open that people asked in advance, and I think they were really curious specifically about the financing. And I know you went over that a little bit, but maybe if you can just review really quickly again how campuses, what sort of, what they might be able to expect and how the changes will change, the costs and return on investment.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think our transaction model is very simple. You are supporting the solar capacity, and then you are locking in and receiving the environmental attributes associated with that capacity over their entire lifetime. And so we aim to keep things very straightforward. And it really is just a transfer of environmental attribute credits, whether that's RECs or carbon offsets. I don't know where prices will go on projects that are not safe harbored. I think to put figures on that would be speculative at this time. Laura, I don't know if you want to jump in on where things could go on that,
Yeah,
but
I mean, you guys saw from Eric's slide that 50% of the entire capital cost of building a project is going away. And so as a result, prices are going to go up. By how much? More than 50% is probably right. But I think, to the question and to the point around the transaction, what we really have built here is a way for organizations that are looking for that environmental attribute to purchase it directly and to not have to get into the business of, this is not the same as energy procurement, right? Like this is different than a PPA or a behind the meter transaction that you may see as your sourcing power for your campus. This is really meant to be, let me find what environmental attributes are out there to try to match to the goals that your campus has, so that we're really building the capacity. So if you look at the project that we have pictured here, that's our first project. It was 1 megawatt. We had, I think, over 30 different organizations that were part of it, and so we translate your what it is that you're looking for, whether it's metric tons of carbon or megawatt hours to match with as with RECs, with carbon intense RECs, we can do that by translating how many watts are you helping to build. So out of that 1 million watts, 1 megawatt, different organizations took X number of watts out of the 1 million to help match against their goal, which is why that's so important to us to understand where you're coming from and try to make you to a new solar project. These projects, as you may have seen in the slide that Eric showed, a big chunk of the dollars that we're getting from the fee that we're charging, that helps to unlock the rest of the financing, the rest of the construction of the project. So it's a one-time fee. You get all the environmental attributes, and then we'll go out and build these projects. I also saw another question on the chat, Bridget, about the OBBB. I've heard it mentioned a different ways, but that's true. So the bill does two things. So it sunsets the tax credits if you have not commenced construction by July 4th of 2026, then your project is not eligible to get the tax credits. And then if your project is not online by the end of 2027, which is sort of the commence construction sort of covers it, because if you commence construction for these projects anytime before, you'd expect that a project is going to come online by the end of 2027 or 2020. By the end of 2027 would have already commenced construction by July of 2026. So let me just make sure that that's clear for everybody. You either have to commence construction by July 4th of 2026, or your project has to be online by the end of 2027. But for it to be online by the end of 2027 means that commenced construction probably would have happened by July of next year. And so what we're saying is we need to buy all the equipment to know how many projects we can put into our pipeline, so that we can pass that 2027, so that we still have projects that can come online in 28, 29, and 30, because that's what it covers if we can commence construction during that time. So all of that to say, basically, there's a huge opportunity to go and to make sure that we're decarbonizing the grid and building on the momentum that the IRA and this window of opportunity still gives us, before we sort of go into this unknown on pricing and demand.
Great, thank you so much. I think that answered the question in the chat, which was about dates for kind of safe harboring. And then we have another question about that as well. And I think that was answered, but folks who asked the questions, please feel free to let us know if they were answered. And if so, we'll mark them answered. Another person asked about the levels of pricing and whether those prices are tied to a certain size of project or what folks might expect. If you have a sense of that, that would be helpful. And otherwise, folks should feel free to reach out to the Clearloop team, and they'll be, happy to provide you an estimate that's better suited to, your need. But yeah, Tucker, if you can speak to that.
Yeah, absolutely. These are this is our pricing flat that we would lock in through 2030. We're at $25 a metric ton and $16 a rec. These are essentially based on the cost of the capacity that is responsible for the environmental attribute. And so they would be the pricing for the environmental attributes on any size project that we would be locking in. Whether you would be having your own solar project or a part of a crowd-funded model as well. So this would be our standard pricing across the board.
Awesome. I have another question. I feel like you mentioned it, but didn't get to spend too much time on it, which is a little bit more about some of the co-benefits in communities. And you mentioned working with, I think it was over 50 teachers, but I'm curious if you can talk more about your work, specifically, I guess, for higher ed, what that could look like in terms of curriculum, but also even with like K through 12 education and also just community investment in general. I think people would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Focusing on those co-benefits is extremely important. And our Energize programming is held up by our product team, product and programs team, I should say. And they're laser focused on creating measurable outcomes for each of these sort of pillars. And so we've really narrowed in on STEM education, obviously with our industry, there's that makes a lot of sense, but there's a lot of collaboration that goes into how we implement these trainings and how we implement these programs. So we've connected with teaching schools in the past and have connected directly with classrooms, finding different ways to create value for the teachers that are interested in learning more about solar and wanting to bring it into their teaching space. Outside of our Energized STEM programs, we also have done some classroom collaborations with our partnership with Vanderbilt University. And so working with teachers that are, maybe interested in pulling in qualitative data on, the rural perceptions of solar or perceptions of solar in rural communities, or interested in doing, business classes and focusing on Clearloop as a business model. And we've gotten a lot of value out of the research that they've been able to perform for us, but it's also exciting to see these sorts of discussions take place in the classroom. So we're very excited about including that campus perspective in all of our projects and how we operate. I think especially when it comes to the education component, both on the STEM side for middle and high school, but also for how we think about the careers program with energy-based curriculum. I think we're very open to collaboration. I want to be careful because I'm not on the product and programs team, and I know that they have a lot of projects underway. But they are very open to connecting with experts in the field that are also focused on these same things. But Laura, I saw you come off mute. Did you want to add to?
I just wanted to echo some of the things that we've done is what we really want to do with our partners and our commercial partners is what we name our institutions and others that want to do this work is there is a lot of room for research. There's a lot of room for co-creation and collaboration. So when Tucker showed this picture and said this is a real place in Mississippi that actually, changed their county seal, like being able to make the connections and make climate commitments real for campuses and communities is incredibly valuable. And what we've seen was this community in Mississippi had no solar projects before we worked with them. Now there's 3 operating solar projects in that community. And it was the first time that, as Joe, who's the economic development person, said, it's the first time that dirt had moved in that community in a long time. They hadn't had a lot of construction. And we're here in Nashville, lots of construction. If you've come down to Nashville recently, every year there's a new skyscraper. But, just south of here, a few miles south of here, there's communities that still have quite a bit of underinvestment. And so to be able to make the connection between the Vanderbilt campus, and we actually brought a lot of the farmers and makers of that community to do on-campus event. It was very wildly successful, where they could swipe their meal cards and purchase all the different goods from makers and community leaders and community participants from Panola County, and to be able to kind of cross-pollinate and have that experience where the solar project was made possible by Vanderbilt's commitment to climate and sustainability, but going beyond the carbon and the kind of ephemeral stuff around carbon, and really making it real for the community and for the students was really rewarding. And then there's a few different professors who've done some research projects as a result of that partnership. And so that kind of stuff, going beyond the megawatts and going beyond the conversation around carbon, making it real for people, is incredibly important as part of what Clearloop is, what we meant to do. And so that's why we have an entire team in the program and product team that is, doing teacher trainings in communities, but going beyond that with careers and connections. So more to be collaborated on, and more research, and we certainly welcome that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think that's a good flag for anyone who's interested in learning more. If you're interested from, more of a staff perspective or a faculty research perspective, Clearloop has had some interesting partnerships. And one of the things that we were excited to, partner with them on to accelerate. So I have a couple more questions from the registration form that people asked in advance, and then I see a couple in the Q&A. So I'm going to quickly go to the registration form that someone asked, which is, can you just briefly talk about the methods being used to estimate avoided emissions from Clearloop projects?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question? I was reading some of the questions and I totally spaced out.
Yeah, someone asked, what are the methods that you're using to estimate avoided emissions from Clearloop projects?
Yeah, we have a partnership with WattTime, and so we are looking at marginal emissions data through an API that we have with them, and that's essentially how we are tracking and reporting on all of our projects.
Oops, I should have just left myself off mute. Thank you. I think this one kind of relates to that, which is, how does Clearloop quantify and attest to the carbon avoidance of each megawatt hour of project generation, and whether you seek to have the carbon avoided carbon offset certified by a third party? Are you offering carbon offsets to offset Scope 1 emissions? And if so, what protocol? I think those were 2 separate questions, but similar.
We developed our methodology to be in line with the greenhouse gas protocol, to ensure that we can, that our customers can make those claims around avoided emissions. One of the things that we found hardest was that there was no common understanding of how you count avoided emissions across the United States in particular. But what we found, and WattTime is a nonprofit out of Oakland that has done a lot of work. A lot of the person who founded it was a PhD student out of Berkeley. And what what we really focus in on is marginal emissions. And so marginal emissions is what happens on the margin, which is where, as you have an intervention with a new solar project, what turns off or what comes down. And you can actually quantify what the emissions reductions are as a result of your new plug-in integration of a brand new solar project. And so we actually take that carbon emissions, the marginal carbon emissions that we're responsible for avoiding, and we can project that out through the life of the project. That's our methodology is built, which Second Nature has reviewed and looked at. One of the challenges with the carbon registries today is that in the past, they have viewed the United States as a country that signed on to the Kyoto Protocol, that's a little bit over 30 years ago, and a country that signed on to the Paris Accords. And so that means that we were meant to have already decarbonized our grid. We know today that to not be the case. Not only is it not the case, but there's an acute level of inequality in how we've decarbonized our grid in our country, which is the map that maybe we can point to again, that shows, places like Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, Tennessee that have plenty of sunshine, lots of land, but still very high carbon emissions, marginal emissions, and that's what you see in that map, in the higher map represented there. So that's how we quantify it. That's how we have built our methodology around. The registries are still catching up to us, and we've talked to a few of them, but we have done a lot of third-party sort of verification so that you can audit and see exactly how we've measured and what you're getting credit for.
I hope that answers the question. And if you have any additional ones, please feel free to follow up on that in the Q&A or the chat. And we're happy to make sure that that addresses your question. Another one was about for those in regulated markets. And the question is, if a VPPA is off the table or unaffordable, what are other options for those in regulated energy markets? And this seems like the Clearloop solution would be a good fit for those. So could you speak to that really briefly as well?
Tucker, you want to take it?
You got it, Laura.
Okay. For regulated markets, yes, it's basically our view is you should go where the highest intensity of carbon is, right? Like that's why we built our model this way, like go build renewable energy projects and procure renewable energy from the parts of the country that have the most carbon intensity, as opposed to being just to your particular market. And it's much harder to do a VPPA or PPA, as some of you have found in those regulated markets. So this is our solution. What we're offering, again, is the environmental attribute that you're getting to match against your consumption, as opposed to being your power provider or acting as a hedge on your power as you do the VPPAs. So when many of you are probably offered VPPAs in very specific places like Texas and Oklahoma, and mostly Texas, where it's a market that is totally free and open. And so that's why many renewable energy providers end up there. It's easier to plug into that grid than anywhere else. And so when you're doing a REC-only deal or when you're doing a PPA, that's why you're offered those places. What we're saying is you're directly building a project in one of the more carbon-intense grids in our country, and you're getting the credit for those attributes, but you're not getting the power. The power is going back to that community.
Great, thank you so much. That was a very good answer. All right, the next one here in the Q&A, I'm kind of going back and forth to make sure we get to most of the questions, which is from Dave. Do you have any experience working with tribes or indigenous communities or connecting them with a higher education partner?
We have not yet. done that. We focus primarily in the Southeast where there's not as many nations. We have a lot of partnerships and we're part of an organization called Accelerate and ACOR, the American Council on Renewable Energy, where those collaborators are part of our ecosystem, but we have not done it directly yet.
Thank you. I'm going to ask one, I think maybe two more from the registration form, unless people put any more in the Q&A. So maybe you can let us know if this perception is correct, but one person asked, with carbon credit markets dissolving or being worth less, is there still an active, strong carbon market for sellers? And I don't know if Meredith might have thoughts on that one too.
Yeah, I can take that. I mean, I think for our purpose, we have used and we have found a way to create a mechanism out of the carbon offset market, and we can deliver measurable reductions with our product and our offset solutions, and it's really always going to be about the impact. So we can point to what your institution did by purchasing carbon credits through one of our projects because a solar project exists there. And so, I think that will always depend on the goal of the institution and what the institution wants out of the carbon offset purchase. But for us, that picture is always very clear, that your contribution is always directly supporting new infrastructure, full stop. And so, I hope that answers the question. I think there's some ambiguity there as to where these markets can go. We're all still reading the news in real time and trying to understand where these trends are headed. But for our purpose, we have found a way to unlock new generation through this market. And I think that is what sort of tells the story from our side. So hopefully that answers the question. Meredith, I don't know if you wanted to jump in. You're certainly an expert on the offsets market as well.
I don't think I have anything to add to that. I think we really support your innovation in this area.
Great. One more that came in through the registration form might be a good one to end on in our last 6 minutes here, but it says, despite the foreseeable challenges, what brings you hope? So maybe I'll go with Laura first.
Yeah, this is, I think this quote has been given, credence to many other people, but, don't, a good crisis always has opportunities. And so, this feels like a very chaotic moment, but there's quite a bit of opportunity. I mean, the headline here is demand for electricity is rising to historic levels. We know we have the technology to decarbonize the grid and expand access to clean energy and invest in underinvested communities. So let's go, let's do it. So this is really the time for action. We've talked a lot, there's been a lot of studies. This is the time to go invest in those places that feel forgotten. You see the parts of the country here that we've circled, where an investment in infrastructure and clean energy infrastructure is not just good for the environment, but people feel like they're part of this economy in a way that they haven't seen themselves in a long time. So that gives me a great deal of hope. There's still, yes, there's headwinds, but there's a great deal of opportunity out there. And we hope that you'll join us.
Great. Thank you, Laura. How about you, Eric? Especially knowing that many of us are in higher ed and you spent a lot of time in higher ed.
Yeah. Well, I think, don't let a good crisis go to waste is certainly applicable to our industry, as Laura said. We all know a lot has changed in a short period of time in ways that are unfavorable, frankly, for the solar industry as well as the higher ed industry, at least in my view. But just as rapidly as things change in one direction, they may change back over time. So what brings me hope here with Silicon Ranch and Clearloop is the fact that we are built to have a long-term impact, and our plans are around how do we maximize this window of opportunity while other things unfold over the next 5 years. When we look ahead to 2030, we could be in a very different place legislatively. And we all know the need for the kinds of things that we do, the kind of critically important work that higher ed does, is more important than ever. So my hope is that that will become more centered as the years pass in the near future.
Thank you. How about you, Tucker?
Yeah, it's a really powerful question. I think to echo Laura and Eric here, I think seeing a lot of the obstacles can be exhausting, and I in my conversations with many folks in sustainability and higher ed, I know that it's often an uphill battle. What you're facing, both from whether that's, hey, we have these limitations based on the city grid that we're in, or whatever it may be, and I think it's easy to get burnt out potentially in this type of environment. But I think from my perspective, it's been really encouraging to see the people that lean in and to see how organizations get smarter and recognize that this is not going to be the end of solar infrastructure. It is a new variable. It is a new challenge that we have to acknowledge, but there's real leadership happening on ways that we can continue to deliver at scale because the goals are very clear. And I think for me that has been some of the most resonating message and messaging that I've encountered just in the last several months, and it's been a joy to be a part of this team too, and to be able to see groups like Silicon Ranch and Clearloop make the business case for, hey, this is why you should implement land management practices. There's a real business case for restoring natural pollinators to your solar field, and to see people make that line and put extra effort into telling that story is, I just think, really encouraging, because it's about something we all really will end up needing, which is electricity. So hopefully I didn't ramble too much on that answer, but it's good to probably ask yourself that daily. Right.
For sure. You definitely didn't ramble, and I appreciate that perspective, thinking about both all the folks in this room, virtual Zoom room, but all throughout the country and the world that are continuing to do this work and, as you said, like work together and lean in to address the challenges that we face. So definitely appreciate that. And maybe that's a good transition to plug one place that you might be able to do that is at the 2026 Higher Education Climate Leadership Summit. So we hope that you will join us at the summit to connect with many folks in this industry trying to advance climate action despite what the environment that we are facing and the headwinds and tailwinds that are constantly occurring. And I see that we are almost perfectly at time. So with that, I just want to say thank you so much to the Clearloop team and to Meredith and all of you for joining us and being here today. And we will send out this information and the recording very soon. And thank you again to all of you for asking such wonderful questions. So hope everyone has a great day, and thank you again. Please keep it up.
Thank you all.